Hey everyone, my name's Michaela, but you can call me Mick, and welcome back to my channel. We are in a new location today. I realized that I've only ever filmed in my office, and I promise you I have an entire house to work with. I'm just usually living up there. And if I'm being honest, I came down here because I wanted a seat, and my cat is obsessed with my office chair, and he wanted to sit on it. And he's so cute sleeping there right now, so who am I to take away his happiness, you know? It has been quite a crazy week for me so far. I am still dealing with an allergic reaction, which I think my face looks a lot better than my last video did because I was still kind of in the midst of it. So that's been happening. I also went to Literary Cleveland's writing conference. It is the largest free writing conference in the nation, and I was so excited to actually be able to go this year, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But also on Monday, September 23rd, not only was it my 1-year wedding anniversary, which is super exciting, it also was the launch of my new podcast, Pen to Pod. This podcast is about writers, for writers. I will be talking more about the episode at the end of this video. Being able to go to Literary Cleveland's writing conference was absolutely amazing. I went to a lot of sessions. I was able to go in person to 3 Friday sessions and 2 Saturday sessions. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I took a ton of notes, so that's kind of what this is off of, is like my note taking. And I said this before in terms of my podcast, Pen to Pod, but I take making writing content so seriously. So seriously. That's why I've been very weary right now to do brand deals that I don't believe in. And I want to make sure that I'm bringing expert opinion and advice to you all as resources. I consider myself an expert on analyzing story and writing craft since I studied it, and I've been studying it since I left college. But I'm not yet an expert on publishing or writing a book. That's why Pen to Pod was born, to bring those resources to all of you. I thought in the same spirit, I would bring my big takeaways from Literary Cleveland's writing conference to all of you as well. So I went to a ton of amazing sessions, and I basically took all of my notes from each session and I boiled them down to 1 to like 3 takeaways depending on how many notes I took. So I thought it would be fun to give my biggest takeaway per each session and relate it to my writing project, House of Stone. And then maybe you hearing me process the takeaway can help you put it to your project. Does that make sense? We're being chatty today. Okay, so my first session was Crafting a Literary Universe, given by ZARIAH L. Banks. I just want to take a moment before I talk about the takeaways from each session to really shout out the authors and writers that spoke at the conference. So this is ZARIAH L. Banks, and she gave this talk. ZARIAH L. Banks is a best-selling, multi-award-winning contemporary romance author who focuses on emotional intimacy. Her novels feature flawed main characters who are committed to doing the necessary shadow work for healing and clearly defining the terms of the love they want. Her debut contemporary women's novel was Beauty Be Held, and it's been making waves. If you are interested in a romance book about steamy, dreamy, and meaningful forever love, then go follow ZARIAH L. Banks on Instagram and be sure to order her book, Beauty Be Held. So this whole session was about crafting a literary universe, or crafting a series that got loyal readers and really hooks the readers in. There was a lot talked about in this, like so much. Like I have probably the most pages for this one. It really covered everything. It covered world building and plotting and setting and character arcs, and literally everything that I talk about on this channel, she covered within an hour and a half. It was wild. But something that I took as a major takeaway, I just pulled one thing because then we'd be here forever. And it was about your villain or your antagonist. So ZARIAH said, villains often see themselves as the protagonist of their own story. Antagonists' choices cause the protagonist to act. A well-developed antagonist causes the main character to grow. When I think about villains or antagonists, I don't know, when she said it, I think I knew that obviously they think they are doing the right thing. You know, they are having a different viewpoint of their villainy than we do as readers. But I don't know if that subconscious thought was brought to the forefront for me when writing. I wrote it down, highlighted it, starred it. And I thought this is just a great thing for me right now in my own project. She also talked a lot about how villains and antagonists don't have to be just in fantasy stories. They can be in contemporary books as well. Even if you're writing a contemporary book, think about who that villain or antagonist is for your story. So your antagonist's choices cause the protagonist to act, but a well-developed antagonist causes the main character to grow. Amazing. So I want to break that down, and at least how I'm viewing it for my own story. So in my project, House of Stone, there's kind of a lot of villains and kind of a lot of antagonists, but the main antagonists for this story is the Novak family as a whole. I have one of my main characters in this family who are the villains and the antagonistic force. He is warring with himself of, do I agree with everything my family does? Do I want to continue doing everything my family does? He is at war with himself. Don't touch the stand. Thank you. Cats. But the other members of the family aren't. So I wrote that down because it is important to know, like, they aren't caricatures, right? They're not, oh my God, what's his name? Is it Gru? From Despicable Me? They're not just villains to be villains' sake, right? They're not caricatures. So that means every choice that's going to cause my protagonist, my main character Helen, to have to act also needs a very believable and real intention from my antagonistic characters. Every decision they make needs to mean something to them, their values, their goals, right? Both sides, protagonist and antagonist, are working against each other, but they're both working towards their own goals throughout the story. So this was a great reminder to remember that as I'm writing this family. And I liked the part where she said, a well-developed antagonist causes the main character to grow. All of your villain's choices are going to cause the protagonist to react to them, and then they make their own choice because of it. It's like a little tennis match. They're making choices and they're reacting and they are warring with each other. But a well-developed antagonist is going to cause your main character to grow, meaning their choices is going to push your character into unfamiliar, unknown, uncomfortable places. And instead of just only reacting, only just they do A, so I do B, they do C, so I do D, it should be more like they do A and I could do B, I could do C, maybe I could also do D. Every choice your villain makes is going to cause your protagonist to grow on their character arc. So how is your villain helping your main character grow? I just thought that was a really good question. I don't have the answers for you. I don't have the answers for myself yet. That's why I wrote it down. It's something that I want to kind of put on a sticky note maybe when I'm writing, and just remember, when I'm writing my villain family, how are they thinking of themselves? They're not thinking of themselves as villains. So every choice they make needs to be intentional and relatable and believable to their character. And then making sure that anytime my main character, Helen, reacts to everything that's happening around her, it puts her in an uncomfortable situation where she's going to have to force to grow one way or the other. It's going to force Helen to choose a path, like a choose your own adventure novel, and every decision she makes in reaction to my villain's choices is going to cause her to get to her ending, which unfortunately for Helen is not a good one. my girl grows wrong in the first book. So this was a great reminder for me. Okay, then I had a session by a nonfiction author, LARA LILLIBRIDGE, and this was called Assembling the Collage. Assembling the Collage was given by LARA LILLIBRIDGE. LARA LILLIBRIDGE is the author of The Truth About Unringing Phones, Essays on Yearning, Mama Mama Only Mama, An Irreverent Guide for the Newly Single Parent, and Girlish, Growing Up in a Lesbian Home. LARA holds an MFA from West Virginia Wesleyan College. A lot of their creative nonfiction essays have to do with the themes of family and dysfunction in family. I have not read LARA before, but I absolutely am going to be picking up their newest book, The Truth About Unringing Phones. This session in particular didn't have a ton of relevance to me right now as a writer. She talked mostly about once you have a ton of finished short stories, how do you compile them into a full novel or like an essay collection, a short story collection. I do not have a ton of short stories or essays that I would be putting into a collection at this time. I would like to eventually, so it was still good for future me, but I want to talk about what I pulled for now me. She did this amazing emotional intensity chart for the book Chronology of Water. Chronology of Water is a book by Lydia Yuknovich, which I have not read, but I have it now on my TBR list. What I really loved about this is that she did an emotional mapping of every chapter, which I thought was so interesting. She mapped it based on emotional intensity. So like high means it was really emotionally intense. Low was more humorous, kind of funny, like a breather. She compared it to having the visual look of someone in water doing like the breaststroke. I thought that was so interesting and a good way to think of emotional tone and pacing, give and take. I just thought this was a great visual way, since I'm a visual learner, to think about emotional intensity and to remind myself, like, we can't keep readers up at that emotional high, right? I would burn out as a reader. So when bad things start to happen and your character is put in the uncomfortable situations and there are highly emotional, tense scenes, it doesn't mean we have to cut it with like a joke, right? It just means we need to bring the intensity down a bit before we can ramp it back up. Because if we stay at this emotional intense state, either a reader's going to burn out or everything intense isn't going to matter because there isn't any weight to it. We didn't have those less intense moments to balance it out. I also have a quote from her here that I wrote down, and I don't think any of us are going to like it, so I'm sorry. She said, "Revision is remodeling, not dusting the furniture." I'm going to let that sink in. Yeah, revision is remodeling, not dusting the furniture. As someone who loves the revision process and the editing process, completely agree, but it's not something I always want to hear. I'm sure anyone who has been through revisions or is going through revisions doesn't want to hear that it's actually remodeling your home. It might be taking the couch you already have, the lamp you already have, and the coffee table, but we're going to put in a new rug. We're going to move the couch so it faces a different way and gets extra sunlight, and we're going to repaint the room, keep a couple paintings, but add also a new one. You know, it's remodeling, not dusting off the furniture. It's not a deep clean of your home. Even though the deep clean still has to happen, it is actually rearranging furniture. And I thought that was such a good quote on revisions. And then we had one of my favorite sessions of the whole conference was about raising your voice, finding your writer's voice by Nardine Taleb. Nardine Taleb is an Egyptian-American writer, editor, and speech therapist in Cleveland, Ohio. Her poetry chapbook, Warda, was published by Passengers Press in 2023. Her writing has appeared in Rattle, The Commuter, Hobart, Mizna, The Offing, and elsewhere. Nardine is a brilliant poet, and what I read of her already published work is fantastic. I have ordered her chapbook and cannot wait to read more by her. I don't want to talk too much about voice today, because I'm going to be talking about voice in my first solo episode for the podcast Pen to Pod. Every other week, you're going to get author interviews. And then on the off weeks, it's going to be a solo episode with me, and I'm going to be breaking down writing craft concepts from actual writing examples. But for this talk, Nardine actually took a lot from A. Alvarez. A. Alvarez has a book on the writer's voice, and she read a quote from him that I want to read to you guys just to start thinking about voice before the next podcast episode. First, you do what all young people do. You try on others' personalities, and then you fall in love. I think this is a great quote about writer's voice, and it's so true. First, when we're starting out writing, we do what young people do. We try on other personalities. We try on other authors' writing voices, which we're going to talk about next week. And then you fall in love. So you're going to fall in love with a particular style of a voice that's going to ultimately change you and how you write, because all love changes us in some way. So I thought that was a beautiful quote that she pulled from A. Alvarez. I'm going to be taking some of things that she talked about in this session, as well as my own thoughts on writer voice as we look at a couple different examples. Next, we had probably my favorite talk from the whole conference was a panel from 3 different authors. It is a panel from ATHENA DIXON, Diana Nguyen, and SARA READ. So ATHENA DIXON is actually a creative nonfiction author. She writes essays. Diana is a poet, and SARA READ is a fiction author. So it was really cool to have 3 different genre writers on the same panel. Their panel was titled Writing Ghosts in Praise of Hauntings, Ancestry, and the Unknown. I thought it was going to be actually about ghosts. It wasn't, and I'm so glad it wasn't. It was about like the metaphorical ghost. Guys, it was so good. It opened up with a lot of discussion on why do you write what you write? And I think this is a broader conversation I'd love to have at some point, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. My friend Becca Tobar, if you aren't following her yet, what are you doing? Go follow her. I love her. She's amazing. In her latest writing vlog, she posed the question right in the beginning, does a book or a story have to have meaning to be good or mean something? And I think this kind of goes into what they were talking about on the panel of why do you write what you write? And I've asked this on my podcast to everyone I've interviewed so far is, do you have like recurring themes in your work? You know, what is the theme behind your current work? Like, what is that deeper meaning? Why do you write the things that you write? I personally believe that every single story has a deeper meaning. That is my personal belief, whether you realize it when you're first writing it or not. And that deeper meaning can even be, I want to provide a world to let someone escape into, right? To actually escape their reality and jump into this one. But if you think about it, even those books have bigger, deeper meanings, because we as authors and writers, we write our perspective of the world and our personal experiences into everything we do, whether we think about it beforehand or not. And they talked a lot about that. SARA READ, the fiction author, said that she does not know what her theme is or that bigger meaning until it's over. Sometimes she said even until years after it's been published, and someone might tell her what the deeper meaning is, and it clicks, it resonates with her. She's like, actually, that makes a lot of sense because of this in my life. I get that. Then you had ATHENA DIXON, which makes sense because she's a nonfiction essayist. She goes into every essay with a purpose, with a meaning. I think essays do carry more weight, if that makes sense. Diana found herself in the middle. Some poems she goes into with a theme in mind, with a deeper meaning. Some she doesn't know until they're done. I personally have found a lot of common themes in my writing. Some of them are what I'm writing in Project House of Stone, which is people will do anything to feel like they belong. That could bring out the best in people and the worst. So I write a lot about community and when community becomes toxic. And that probably has to do with a lot of my personal life experiences. I've also written a lot of things about friendship breakups because I had a very horrific one that I did a lot of therapy about. And it has completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I write a lot about friendship breakups. So those are just two things that are reoccurring themes for me that aren't even like, they're not even that deep. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be so heavy and so deep and so raw. But I do believe that we all write what we write for something, even if it's not conscious when we are writing it, if that makes sense. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Please let me know. I'd love to have a chat. ATHENA DIXON also gave really, really great advice. She is a creative nonfiction essayist, and she writes very personal things. And someone in the audience asked, how do you know when I shouldn't be writing about something because I'm still bitter and have a lot of emotions about it? I thought that was pretty relatable. There's a lot of things that I've gone through in life that I would love to talk about and explore in my writing, but how do I know if I'm too close to it to write it yet? She gave amazing advice by saying, figure out for yourself what is a bruise versus what is a wound. She said, if it is a bruise, it's still tender, hurts to touch, but you can write it. If it is a wound, don't go near it. If you want to write about something particular that is a wound, put it into short form. Get it all out and then put it away in a folder for later. Once the wound becomes a bruise, take those out so you have that raw emotion and then rewrite it. And I thought that was really, really, really profound and great advice. Something else I want to talk about that I talk about on my channel, but I want to really reiterate since I do have a lot of writing craft content. They talked about how to dare to be an amateur in something. They said rules can get in the way. Sometimes you have to approach a practice with beginner's eyes. This is so true for writing. I love analyzing story. I do. It's one of my favorite things. It's why I started the YouTube channel. I could talk about story all day long, which is why this is a very chatty video for me. Here are just a couple of books that I've used in other videos having to do with rules. I love this guy, huge, thick manuscript, Save the Cat, and this other complete guide to writing. Sometimes you have to just throw them away. I'm the firm believer of making time to study the rules of something, and then when it comes to do the thing, forget them. Just forget them for now. When we are in the drafting stage, we need to go in with beginner's eyes. That's when we are allowed to experiment. We can play. We can be less refined with our words. We don't have to find our writer's voice in draft one, you know? I don't have to have the structure perfect, the sentences perfect. I don't need to fully understand my character arc. I don't need to make sure that setting is coming across in every single page. I just need to play in the world, you know? I just need to write it. I don't even have to make sure the themes are coming across. Think of like 6th grade me who would like write a million books somehow in like composition journals, and I need to channel her, my inner child, my inner beginner. Your inner beginner. Channel your inner beginner. When you are writing draft one, it is so, so important. I really feel like the writing craft, it's so good to study it, but when you're writing, turn it off. The time to turn it on comes in revision. That is when this all comes into play. I want to make sure that these authors' works also get shouted out because I've literally ordered all of these books from my indie bookstore. First, we have ATHENA DIXON, who writes creative nonfiction. She wrote The Incredible Shrinking Woman and the most recent memoir and essays, The Loneliness Files. She talked a lot about the Loneliness Files on the panel because it was born out of the thought that, you know, during the 2020 year of the pandemic, that if she died in her apartment, who would even know? Which, yes, that's a very morbid thought. And she traces her life in essays of all these decisions that she made to get to the point that she was at there at that time, alone in this apartment, away from family, during a worldwide pandemic. Diana Nguyen writes poetry that really elegizes her late brother. Both poetry books do that, but all of her poems seem to focus on family haunts, like what haunts her family. They are very, very personal. She was so raw and open and honest with us, and I really appreciated that. Ghost of really is the one that focuses on her late brother. I don't even want to tell her story. I can't tell her story. You just need to order it. Can you all just promise me to order these books or find them at your library or request them? Okay, thank you. And then we have Sara Read, who has written Johanna Porter Is Not Sorry, and then Principles of Emotion. So Sara writes a lot of things that she doesn't know, right? So the panel was ghosts, hauntings, and the unknown. The ghosts and hauntings, like Diana had ghosts, Athena had hauntings, Sara had the unknown. So in her most recent book, Principles of Emotion, she embodied her character who's like this mathematical genius, and she knew nothing about math. So she talked a lot about what it feels to write something that is unknown to you personally. And then we had the keynote speaker who talked all about creating dangerously. EDWIDGE DANTICAT is a professor of the humanities in the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies at Columbia University. She received her BA in French Literature from Barnard College and her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Brown University. She is the author of 17 books, including Breath, Eyes, Memory, an Oprah Book Club selection, Crick Crack, a National Book Award finalist, The Farming of Bones, an American Book Award winner, The Novels and Stories, so many others, guys. She has an amazing breadth of work. She's also written 7 books for children and young adults, a travel narrative, After the Dance, and a collection of essays, Create Dangerously, which was the keynote presentation and the theme for the entire conference. Her most recent publication is We're Alone, which is an essay collection that came out September 3rd from Grey Wolf Press. She read some pieces from her book, We're Alone, and her writing is such a good mix of history, real life events, and her own life events, and mixing them together. Truly a masterclass. Like all of the other presenters before, the books that I ordered, just in case you guys are interested in reading them as well, is We're Alone, The Farming of Bones, Crick Crack, Create Dangerously, and Everything Inside. Yes, it may be a free conference, but I did spend a lot of money on books, and I highly recommend reading Danticat's work or finding her freely published work that she has all over the place. Danticat's keynote was very amazing. I took barely any notes because I was so just, present in what she was saying, and it was very emotional as well. Danticat is a Haitian woman, and she talked a lot about what is going on right now in the political landscape because of a flagrant lie that has been spread by former president of Haitian immigrants, eating dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio. That's the state I'm in. I have friends who've lived in Springfield, Ohio and went to college there. And Danticat talked a lot about that and how it is very, very traumatizing and negatively affecting her community and all immigrant communities across the nation. I don't want to speak too much on Danticat's experience in that. Instead, I highly recommend reading her op-ed that she did in the Washington Post about it just a couple days before, I think literally like the day before she came to speak to us. She wrote an op-ed called Slander Against Haitians is a Distraction. And I read it. I highly recommend you read it. And I think that just hearing this from Danticat's words is going to be a lot more powerful than me speaking on it. But it was an amazing keynote speech. And that's what her talk tied back to, is creating dangerously is creating art and writing, even with literal fears of harm, death, prosecution for your words, or just in spite of any fears you might have. The biggest takeaway that I can give all of you from her speech is allow yourself to feel free to tell your story, no matter the dangers. I don't want to get emotional on Maine, but everyone's stories matter. We need diverse stories. We need diverse experiences told. Art changes lives. It changes lives. It changes hearts. It changes minds. And I don't know, her speech was just very moving and impactful. And I was honestly just very blessed to hear from a lot of amazing, diverse authors with so many different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives, and to hear them talk about their art has really just inspired me to think more about my art as well. And I want to repeat what she said, is to allow yourself to feel free to tell your story. This conference was so amazing. I highly recommend looking into if there's any writing conferences around you, or Literary Cleveland puts on a free writing conference every single year. If you are in the Ohio area, the Northeast Ohio area, or you are in a neighboring state, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, someone around us, and you're able to drive or travel pretty easily to Cleveland, I highly recommend it. It's 2 full days of events. They also have like dinners and open mics and mixers and stuff to meet other writers. There was a ton of people who traveled, as well as if you aren't from Cleveland but you want some of the speakers, they have like virtual talks all leading up to the conference every year. So go follow Literary Cleveland, keep up with them, and if you're able to make it, I highly recommend. Or I just recommend, I don't know, there's something so, I was just like really inspired. And I cry easily. Sorry guys, I'm like crying on Maine, and I don't do that often, but there's just something really inspiring about being around a ton of artists talking about art. It's very inspiring. And if you have the privilege to be able to attend something like that, I highly recommend doing so. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope my rambling made some sense to you and helped you and inspired you in some way. If you haven't listened to the first episode of Pen to Pod yet with Kath Richards, her book A Love Most Fatal comes out September 26th. I have it here. I started it. It's fantastic. So go give it a listen. She's a romance author who is self-published and talks all about this book, her publishing journey, and so many other things that we actually talked about today, like themes and why do we write what we write, and all of that. It was just a truly lovely conversation. The next episode will be about writer voice. So if you were intrigued about that, or you want to learn more about writer's voice, then look out for that episode coming next Monday. And I don't know the date for that. September 30th? Sure. If you made it to the end of this video, go ahead and put a cat emoji, specifically a black cat emoji, for my cat Mochi, who stole my seat in my office and forced me to come down here, and then came down here anyway when I started filming. Okay, thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you all have a lovely day. See you next time.